Where did your love of photography come from? Because I know this has been a bit of a difficult one for you, hasn't it?
It's hard. It's really hard to say, because I've always enjoyed carrying a camera around with me, and I was always the dedicated photographer for friendly get-togethers and things. But I suppose my real love for it started about 2 years ago when I got my camera Aspen. She's a DSLR, and I got her for Christmas, and I started a project which lasted for a year, and that's really how I became so interested.
All right, now you said DSR.
DSLR, that's a digital SLR. That's one of the big fancy ones with all the gizmos and lenses and things.
Oh, I see. And what were on it? You called it Aspen. You've got a name for all your cameras, haven't you?
I do, which is quite embarrassing, but they are all named because they are all my loves. So.
Right, but why trees?
My trees, there is no real reason. I liked the name Aspen, and when I got my film camera at Minolta, my other half said to me, "Oh, his name's Asa." He just said it outright, and I said, "Okay, then that's where we're going with this." And today, my Instax came through the post, and she is called Maple.
Maple or
Maple?
Mabel?
Maple.
Oh, Maple. It was. So we're keeping the...
We are keeping the tree theme.
The tree theme on the go. Now, interesting, because I popped up this afternoon to have a look at the exhibition.
Oh.
And I was quite stunned with it, I have to say.
Oh,
quite
thank you
amazing.
very much.
But it's interesting because there's another thing that you seem to quote on a lot of your sites or sites that you're on, quoting the American poet. Was it Muriel Rukensire?
Yes, her quote about the world is not made of atoms but of stories.
Right. So, do you see yourself, interestingly, because looking at your pictures, that you see yourself almost as a storyteller rather than...
I think I do. I mean, I'm a lit student, so I have really always loved books and telling stories, and I think photography is just an extension of that, really. A lot of people say, "Oh, what sort of photography are you into?" And in terms of my personal work, I always tell them narrative, because I like to take a picture which is almost a snapshot from a wider story that you would look at and think, what came before that and what would come after, and look at the different elements in the picture and think about those ideas. And that means that the picture can be read 1,000 different ways, because everyone who comes to it and looks at it will interpret it differently and make up a different story for it.
Now, tell us about some of the projects that you've been involved with.
Well, I suppose I've done several now. The first and the biggest was the 52-week project, which was self-portraiture project, which ran for a year. I had to take a self-portrait every week for 52 weeks, which was quite a struggle at times, definitely, but the finished product, when I put it all into a book and looked at them all as a set, not just as individual pictures, I was quite surprised because of how far I'd come. It started when I first got Aspen, and the way that the pictures changed, for one thing, and the way I started thinking about the pictures each week. Symbolism, things started to come into it much more. And then my inspirations from other photographers as well, I tried to put that into some of the pictures later on too. So yeah, that was definitely the biggest one. I think the 52s.
And I suppose thinking about that one, well, go on, tell us about was it 100 days?
And yeah, well then last year over summer I did a project with a friend I met on Flickr called the 100 Days of Summer Project, which I kind of made up myself, where I took a photograph every single day for 100 days over the summer, from June through to middle of September. And that was very different from the 52 weeks because it wasn't self-portraiture. I decided at the very beginning that wasn't where I wanted to go with it. All I wanted to do was kind of document the summer in terms of memories and my friends and the things that I did. And put them together to make a kind of diary, I suppose. And of course what it meant was there were days when it was really hard because I'd be very busy and perhaps forget my camera, or even I just sit around all day, as you do in the summer holidays. You sit and browse the internet and watch a couple of films and don't really do very much. And it would get to 11 o'clock at night and I think, oh my goodness, I've got an hour and I need to take a photograph and it needs to be good. And that was a struggle because it made me have to think very quickly and very creatively. And whatever I came out with, I had to upload it because there were people on Flickr who were following and wanting to see what came next. and I'd have to upload these pictures that I weren't happy with, and that was a challenge, really, because I'm quite a perfectionist and I like to upload just my best work. But it was really good for me because I took lots of very different kinds of pictures during those 100 days. Portraits of my friends and landscapes and flowers and everything that summer was made up of, really.
Did you find that sort of having to force yourself to take sort of photos like that, did your actual technique of photography improve in that time? Would you say?
I would say it did. Up until that point, I'd been doing specifically really narrative portraiture. And at the point when I was starting to take pictures of anything other than humans, I found, I've never done this before. I've never done, for example, cookery, taking pictures of cakes and the things that I baked during the day. And there was a different technique to that, absolutely. You need to use different apertures, you need different lenses, all that kind of thing. And it forced me to kind of think about photography in other ways than just photography of people.
Right, I see. Talking of which, now I suppose it's all connected with it. I mean, use of sort of digital aids like Photoshop, this sort of thing. How do you see that? I'm just wondering if people might think that, okay, if you can now start manipulating your images, now is that real photography, or do you see that as actually part of the process?
It's very difficult, and I have kind of made up my own rules around this, really. When it comes to clients, when I do portraits for clients, which is kind of where I put my business, I always use Aspen, for one thing. I always use my digital, and I will always manipulate them a little bit on Photoshop, not too much, because I am a natural light photographer and I like to use as much that's natural as possible. But for things like you vignette the edges a little bit, you bring out some colours, and then perhaps you airbrush faces and get rid of blemishes, things like that. Absolutely, I mean, that's portraiture, and the client wants a very pretty, very lovely picture of whoever. And that's what I used to do with really all of my photographs, because I wanted them all to be beautiful. And what I found was that actually I was unhappy with that, because that wasn't my life, that wasn't real, despite the fact that it's photography, and as Susan Sontag has written about photography being the most real medium. It's not, because you can put it on a computer and manipulate it in whatever way you want. You can manipulate it to the point where it doesn't really reflect reality anymore at all. I mean, look at advertisements in magazines, the celebrities who their entire visage, everything is changed. They made to look perfect when, of course, they don't look like that at all, and people believe that they need to aspire to that, and of course they can't, because what they're looking at isn't real. So when it came to later, I decided I'd like to use film more, and if I used film, I wouldn't put it on the computer, and I wouldn't manipulate it in Photoshop or anything like that. It comes out the camera, that's as it stays. And I use now for my personal work film a lot more, because I think it is much better in terms of memory. It captures that much better.
Well, tell us about the exhibition. Well, I'll tell you what, before that, I mean, there's one picture, if anyone goes down to the exhibition, they'll see this, that fantastic photo, now I'm assuming it is you, fleeping, I was going to say flying or leaping through the air across that track. Now, you've done that, you did that on a timer?
Yes.
How long did that take?
A very long time. That was... It did take. It was a very cold day, and I went out there without any shoes, and it's about half a mile from my house. And I did it till I got the picture, and just jumped and jumped and jumped, and came home and wasn't happy. When I was there, I thought, I'm not happy with any of these, I'm going to have to give up, and what a shame. And I got home, and there was this one picture, which is the one which is now in the exhibition, which I thought, no, that captures what I want it to capture. That's what I want. But you know, you'd say, oh, well, that's awful, you had to do it for so long, and what dedication, and the rest of it. And actually, it was part of my 52 weeks project, and one of the things I loved about that project was that I had this time, that I would have to make this time every single week to go out, you know, to get there, to set up, to take the picture, and then to come back, and I'd be on my own and thinking about things, about life, you know, as teenage girls do. And it gave me that time to be on my own every week, and to create on my own and think about what I wanted to project. So actually, the time it took me to do the jumping was just as valuable as the photo that ended up in the end.
And that particular picture, do you think that's going to be your signature picture?
For the moment, I think it is. It's the one that a lot of people pick out, I think. And I consider it probably my best, at least in terms of the 52 project. But then it's difficult to say because my photography isn't just in one basket at the moment. I've done travel stuff and self-portraiture and then client portraiture, so it's hard to juggle, and depending on which part you're looking at of my work, that depends on which one is my signature piece, I suppose.
True. And the exhibition, we haven't mentioned it yet, and you just talked about travel. The fantastic pictures you took in Africa.
Yeah, Africa was life-changing, really. I'm on a gap year at the moment, and I went travelling at the beginning of this year to southern Africa, and I worked out in an orphanage with some children in Swaziland for a month. While I was out there, I had all my cameras with me, and primarily, of course, my focus was on working with the kids and dealing with the kids. But I'd take my camera every day, and they'd end up asking me for picture, and so I'd happily oblige, really, and take as many as they wanted. And I also had a trip out to Kruger National Park while I was there, and to try my hand at wildlife photography, which has to be said I don't have the patience for in the end, but I did come back with some shots that I was happy with of, Africa animals, so zebras and impalas and buffalo and things.
Brilliant. Now, is that right, this exhibition at the Dragonfly, this is your first exhibition?
Yes, it is my first solo exhibition. I've been at the Dragonfly before. I was there as part of the summer exhibition last year, and I had a kind of a wall to myself, which was lovely, and that was when Susan offered me this exhibition this year. So it's my first solo exhibition.
Fantastic. And just remind us, how long is it on till?
It's on until the 30th, which is Saturday, and it'll be lovely to see people there. I'll try and pop in again before the week's out.
Brilliant. I think we want some signed copies of it. So it's on till, was it 10 till 4, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, 10 till 4 weekdays, 10 till 1 on Saturday.
On Saturday. Super. Rosa, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Excellent. Cheers.